Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. Canadian taxpayers could be on the hook for up to $15 billion in compensation to First Nations families. Even though COVID-19 case counts may be rising in some communities in Canada, that's not the case with some towns in southern Alberta. We investigate why. And we see how God's hand was at work at a COVID-19 field hospital set up in California.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. We begin tonight talking about golfing legend Tiger Woods, who was involved in a serious car crash in Southern California today. Police say Woods sustained moderate to critical injuries when he rolled his vehicle just outside of Los Angeles. Fire officials used the jaws of life to get him out of his vehicle, which was found lying on its side. He was later then taken to hospital. The PGA tweeted this statement earlier today. We have been made aware of Tiger Woods' car accident today. We are awaiting further information when he comes out of surgery. On behalf of the PGA Tour and our players, Tiger is in our prayers and will have our full support as he recovers. Closer to home, the Lethbridge Police Commission presented its report to Council today. Last December, Council voted to cut Lethbridge Police Service funding by $1 million in 2021 and 2022. There are currently 173 police officers serving our city. Now, the report says funding will continue for peace officers and the Watch program. Apparently, there'll be no change to the level of service officers will provide. Other funding issues will be addressed at a later date.
We have the excess money in the BAUs, so we can use that money then to pay for the level of police service that we currently have. So we're not going to go into a deficit situation. We're just going to continue to use the money that's available. What's going on in the city right now with the drug crisis and the increased need for the police, we can't reduce the services that we already have. We feel like we're at a bare bones minimum already with 173 sworn officers plus our civilians and the CPOs that we can't reduce. We need to keep the levels up.
The Lethbridge Police Commission says it will work towards a strategic plan with the Lethbridge Police Service within the next year. Lethbridge City Council was meeting Tuesday night to discuss whether or not we will be wearing masks until the end of the year. Last Thursday, a committee met and put forward a motion to not extend the mandatory face covering bylaw in our city. Councillors Blaine Hagan, Ryan Parker, and Joe Morrow voted in favor of the motion. Mark Campbell voted against it. Now, Tuesday night into the night, councillors were debating whether or not to accept the recommendations from the committee to let it expire or to continue within the mandatory face covering bylaw and have us continue to wear it until December 31st. We'll have the results of the vote for you on social media and our Wednesday evening newscast. The City of Lethbridge is looking into potentially following the lead of the municipality of Wood Buffalo and opting out of the centralized EMS dispatch. Lethbridge Mayor Chris Spearman has shared his concerns that the province's centralized plan puts lives at risk and that it is paramount that we retain local EMS services. The province says they can meet the needs of those of us in Lethbridge, and centralizing EMS dispatch will save the province millions of dollars. Council has directed the city manager to look into what options are available to the city and to keep an eye on future legal proceedings between Wood Buffalo and Alberta Health Services. COVID-19 numbers continue to climb in Lethbridge. As of late Tuesday, the South Zone had 32 people in hospital with 10 in ICU. Lethbridge currently has 212 active cases. Now, looking deeper into southern Alberta case totals, some communities have 5 cases or less. Ainsley O'Reilly spoke with the mayors of Brooks and Fort Macleod to find out why their case counts are lower in their regions.
Bridge City News updates our audience daily on rising COVID-19 numbers. But something that's been overlooked is communities with little or no cases. Warner County has 4 cases, Willow Creek 2, the Crow's Nest Pass, as well as Brooks, Alberta, without a single case.
We didn't shortcut. We didn't see people shortcutting those requirements. We saw a lot of businesses being ultra safe, and I think that's continued on.
Last spring, Brooks was hit hard after a massive outbreak at its meatpacking facility, JBS Meats, took 9 lives and infected more than 100. Brooks Mayor Barry Morishita says that hardship has brought the community together.
We went through a lot to get through that, and I think our partnerships with our community members, our businesses, the message has been relayed loud and clear.
Fort Macleod's region has just 2 cases, and city officials say they can't be certain why that may be, but attribute low numbers to personal responsibility.
Overall, I believe our communities are smaller, so there's probably less opportunities for spread. So people are keeping to themselves, it's obvious, and personal responsibility is a big part of this all as well.
For Bridge City News, I'm Ainsley O'Reilly.
Over the past 24 hours, Alberta health officials say there were 267 new cases of COVID-19. There are currently active alerts or outbreaks in 231 schools, or about 10% of schools in the province. There are 326 people in hospital with the virus, along with 51 in ICU. Health officials say 11 new COVID-19 deaths were also reported over the last 24 hours. Dr. Dean Henshaw says that more than 180,000 doses of the COVID-19 vaccine have now made their way into the arms of Albertans. That includes 73,000 have received 2 doses. Dr. Dean Henshaw says as more people are vaccinated, we can then talk about reopening more of the economy later this summer.
Volumes of doses that we're currently anticipating we would receive, as we've been told by the federal government. I would anticipate that if we have, again, all Albertans who want a vaccine, if we're able to offer all those individuals vaccine by the end of the summer, and if we have enough Albertans who step forward to take the vaccine, that we can protect those most at risk. I think that is a possibility, but it really does depend on the next few months. It depends on our ability to keep the spread of the virus low for the next few months while we roll the vaccine out, and make sure that as we get that additional supply over the coming months, we're encouraging Albertans to take us up on the offer of vaccine to protect themselves and their communities.
February is Heart Health Month. Stats Canada says heart disease is one of the leading killers among Canadians. Lethbridge Dr. Clayton Cogano has some advice about supplements which he says reduce the risk of heart disease.
One of my favorite that I like to suggest is actually, it's called Protegus. It's hawthorn. And hawthorn, it's the leaf and berry that grow on hawthorn trees. And you'd think, well, that's weird, but every single bit of research on hawthorn shows benefit for your cardiovascular system. You can even drink it medicinally as a tea. You don't even have to take it as a supplement. It's safe in pregnancy, is how safe it is. So that's when we know something's extremely safe.
Catch the full interview with Dr. Clayton Cogano, who will also discuss the health benefits of a Mediterranean diet. That's coming up later in our broadcast. A proposed school boundary review that has been met with opposition by parents and families on the city's west side could come to a head this evening. The Lethbridge School District Board of Trustees will meet tonight to vote on the proposed boundary lines. The proposed new boundaries would dictate whether students in Copperwood will attend GS Lakey or Senator Joyce Fairburn Middle Schools, among other scenarios, and in some cases it will cause students to be separated from classmates they've attended with for some years, and for some students to no longer to be eligible for busing. According to School Board Chair Christine Light, more than 600 feedback submissions came from parents, and the board has been reviewing those over the past couple of weeks.
On the west side, our west side boundaries, all of our schools are at or above capacity. And so we know that classroom sizes are at risk of getting bigger, and there just isn't space for more kids in those core areas within the schools. And so we needed to start thinking of creative ways to create room in our schools.
We'll bring you more on the proposed boundaries as the information becomes available. Today is Canadian Agriculture Day. It's a day in which we celebrate our farmers and ranchers. Alberta Premier Jason Kenney said in a UCP promo video that he appreciates the hard work of those in our agriculture sector and says Alberta is one of the heartlands of Canadian agriculture.
I want to say thank you to all the farmers, ranchers, livestock producers, and others in the food industry here. Last year, we saw some of the best yields and farm receipts in our history. I know that wasn't the case for everybody, and some areas have been suffering bad weather for several years, and our heart goes out to them, as does our health. But at the same time, we can celebrate the vital future of agriculture in this province, and our government is going to do everything we can to expand that with our announcement of the $800 million historic investment in the first modernization of Alberta's irrigation infrastructure in 6 decades that will help to significantly expand the amount of arable and productive land and yields in southern Alberta. And we've only just begun. We have far more ambitious plans about the renewal of irrigation in this province, about supporting crop science and other ways of getting higher yields.
Alberta Premier Jason Kenney also says Albertans have no time for voices of division and hate following a weekend anti-lockdown rally where some people carried tiki torches. Kenney said in a statement that there is no doubt some people came to the event to oppose public health measures, but he says people have to disassociate themselves from the extremists. Opposition leader Rachel Notley and Edmonton Mayor Don Iveson also condemned the march on social media. The Saskatchewan government says pharmacists will deliver COVID-19 vaccines in phase 2 of its rollout. It says pharmacists will increase public access to the vaccine, which it says will improve the rate of vaccination. Details are under development, including which community pharmacies are participating. The province's fees for pharmacists to deliver COVID-19 vaccines are covered in a tentative new agreement with the Pharmacy Association of Saskatchewan. The growing threat from COVID-19 variants has prompted the Manitoba government to tighten some of its pandemic control guidelines. Instead of 15 minutes, people will be considered contacts of a case to be required to undergo testing and isolation if they've been in close range of an infection for 10 minutes. The province is also ending an exemption that allowed some household members of a positive case to avoid self-isolation. The province is moving forward. Everyone in the same home as a positive case will have to self-isolate and get tested. It could cost Canadian taxpayers up to $15 billion to fulfill a Canadian Human Rights Tribunal order to compensate First Nations families and children affected by the child welfare system. The new figure from the Parliamentary Budget Office also includes the costs associated with denials or delays of essential services. The updated estimate factors in around 100,000 more First Nations families who are now deemed eligible for compensation. Federal Conservative leader Erin O'Toole called for Canada to put more pressure on China after the House of Commons voted to declare China's treatment of ethnic Muslims a genocide. O'Toole criticized Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and his cabinet ministers for skipping the vote.
Members from all parties voted to recognize the genocide currently being carried out by the People's Republic of China against Uyghur and other Turkic Muslims. I want to thank all MPs for sending a clear signal on the importance of human rights and of dignity. But Justin Trudeau and his cabinet refused to vote. In fact, Mr. Trudeau and most of his team did not even show up. Their coordinated absence speaks volumes. It is shameful that Justin Trudeau and the Liberal government continue to refuse to call the horrific conduct by the Chinese Communist Party what it is, a genocide.
The country of Syria, many would argue, also does not exactly have a stellar record when it comes to human rights. Now, that country is set to have an official posted to the UN Human Rights Forum, and that does not sit well with our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari.
That's the reason why Donald Trump withdrew from the UN Human Rights Council, but President Biden got right back in. So you can understand the environment, the political environment of the UN, and allowing Syria to head up one of its human rights divisions, well, it only speaks to the environment over there and what are they thinking.
Lisa will also talk about how the United States is in talks with Iran about having American hostages released. That interview is coming up later in our broadcast. Canada's Chief Public Health Officer, Dr. Theresa Tam, says results from COVID-19 vaccinations are encouraging and we could see restrictions lifted before September. Tam says, however, that wearing masks and limiting close contact outside of our households is still paramount.
I do think vaccines play an absolutely key role in our return to, closer to what the life that we have known. And I think as many people as possible getting vaccinated means that resurgence then becomes less likely. And even before September, I think depending on a number of factors such as vaccine uptake, ongoing monitoring of the variants and how vaccine coverage is provided, as the virus could always change over time, of course. But that I think we will see the ability to shift some of those public health measures as the months go by.
A Calgary Tory MP is demanding to know how many Canadians need to receive the COVID-19 vaccine before the Liberals recommend restrictions be lifted. Conservative health critic Michelle Rempel-Garner says many are losing hope.
We're 3 months behind the rest of the developed world in getting vaccines. The public is tiring of restrictions and compliance may become an issue. We know COVID restrictions have caused increased domestic violence, a mental health crisis, and countless business closures, and they can't continue indefinitely. We need hope, leadership, and a plan for safe reopening. How many Canadians must be vaccinated before the federal government starts recommending lifting restrictions?
Public health measures, including restrictions, have been difficult for all Canadians. I'll start there, thanking Canadians for their enormous contributions to the safety and health of their friends, their family, and their community. Mr. Speaker, we are on a good path with vaccination, and as the member knows, we are set to receive well over 600,000 vaccines this week, 400,000 the week after. We know that the end is in sight, Mr. Speaker, but Canadians must continue to protect each other. We'll be there for Canadians and for provinces and territories during these next difficult weeks.
Meanwhile, in the United States, a new report says 2 Democrats in the House of Representatives are pressuring TV and content providers to stop carrying conservative channels, including Fox News, One American News Network, and Newsmax. The reason? They say the channels carry misinformation and are rumor mills and conspiracy theory hotbeds. The 2 Democrats, Anna Eshoo and Jerry McNerney, allegedly sent their letters to no less than 12 content providers, including Amazon, Apple, Comcast, Cox, and Verizon. The Democrats allegedly told these content providers that by allowing the conservative networks to use their platforms, it was leading to real harm. Republicans pushed back against the letters as examples of elected lawmakers in their official capacity threatening the American First Amendment. In a released statement, Republican FCC Commissioner Brendan Carr said, Democrats are sending a message that it is clear as it is troubling. These regular entities will pay a price if the targeted newsrooms do not conform to Democrats' preferred political narratives. When Dr. Ed Carnes arrived in Lancaster, California, he knew he was about to walk into many situations requiring prayer, wisdom, and medical skill. Now, more than a month later, Dr. Carnes recounts how he saw the Lord's hand clearly at work through skilled doctors and nurses at the Samaritan's Purse Emergency Field Hospital.
Today we've gathered for the closing ceremony for the Emergency Field Hospital in Lancaster, California. It's been a wonderful ceremony. It's been a remarkable experience, and we are leaving early because the Antelope Valley Hospital are now ready to continue without our help. This field hospital was vital for the fight against COVID. The Antelope Valley Hospital was virtually overrun with COVID patients. And so when we arrived, we took 54 beds that we had and filled them with COVID patients. It's a pretty remarkable feat to have taken care of all those patients. That's what I know is our purpose. Yes, to provide medical care, but also we all want to share the gospel at every opportunity we have.
Now here's a real cute little story. The U.S. Coast Guard, along with wildlife officials, teamed up to release around 146 sea turtles off the South Texas coast. Now these turtles and thousands more were found stunned by the sub-zero temperatures following the freezing weather which recently hit Texas.
Yeah, so I'd say probably we'll walk them over to the side right there. Oh yeah. Oh, we want you to walk down? You can kind of put them down here. Yeah, you can walk down. We don't want anyone going over. I know. Alright. Got him? Yep. Go ahead. See ya.
Woo! There you go. That was feisty.
That was certainly nice to see indeed. It was also nice to see some sunshine today following the light flurries earlier in the day in southwestern Alberta, and there's a chance of even more of the white stuff. Full weather details are coming up. Well, we had some light flurries earlier today, but temperature-wise, not bad as we were just above the freezing mark here in southwestern Alberta. Jeanette Roche is back with a complete look at the weather forecast. Jeanette, when it comes to snow, we're not out of the woods just yet?
That's true. In fact, tonight we could see another 2 centimeters of flurries, as well as a risk of a thunderstorm overnight. 50-kilometer-per-hour wind gusts are also expected overnight. Into tomorrow, Wednesday, high of 2 degrees. We can expect more flurries tomorrow morning, and then clearing up by the afternoon. Also 50k wind gusts as well. Thursday, a mix of sun and cloud and also windy. 9 degrees is our expected high for Thursday. And then we're going to dip down to -2 for Friday with a 60% chance of flurries beginning Friday all the way through Friday night and into Saturday as well. 60% chance of flurries. -4 the expected high for Saturday. And then we're going to climb all the way up to 9 degrees for Sunday and Monday. So we're kind of like a yo-yo this upcoming week. We're raining, we're snowing, we're cloudy, we're sunny, and then we're in minuses and pluses. So it's a little bit of everything. Average high for this time of year, 3 degrees, average low -10. Our high temperature on this day was back in 1983. It was 15 degrees and it was -31 in 1940. 7:26 is when the sun rose this morning and our sun set this evening. Finally into the 6 o'clock hour right at 6:03 p.m. So nice to see that the sun is staying up a little bit longer these days. Over on the west coast, increasing clouds throughout the day in both Victoria and Vancouver tomorrow. High of 7 in Victoria, 8 degrees is the high in Vancouver. 2 expected in Edmonton and 0 in Calgary tomorrow. Sunny skies across most of Alberta tomorrow, with the wind chill going to feel a little bit nippier than what those temperatures look like, more like around the -teens in the mornings and -8 or 9 throughout the day. -2 the expected high tomorrow in Saskatoon, 30% chance of flurries there and in Regina as well. -2 the expected high in Winnipeg tomorrow with a mix of sun and cloud. Nice to see those temperatures jumping a little bit higher in the prairies there. I'm sure they appreciate that. Mix of snow and rain rather in Toronto, a high of 5 degrees. About 5 centimeters of the white stuff expected tomorrow in Ottawa with a high of 1. Montreal expecting some flurries as well to increase throughout the day, so starting in the afternoon there. 6 degrees, the expected high for both Fredericton and Halifax. Could experience a bit of wind there in those cities as well. Charlottetown's expecting to see a high tomorrow of 2 degrees, and both drizzle and snow expected in St. John's tomorrow, and some freezing drizzle expected in the higher terrains. Wind gusts up to 60 kilometers per hour in St. John's tomorrow with a high of 1. So there you go, that is your forecast.
A $2.2 billion US deal is shaking up the Canadian skincare industry. Estee Lauder is buying Toronto-based Deciem Beauty Group, which is the company behind the popular skincare brand known as The Ordinary. Deciem, which calls itself the Abnormal Beauty Company, was founded back in 2013. BMO is reporting a first quarter profit of just over $2 billion, which is up 27%. Provisions for credit losses amounted to $156 million, which is down from $349 million from a year ago. The bank's executives also say U.S. clients are benefiting from a faster vaccine rollout compared with Canada, which is impacting the bank's bottom line. Revenue for the quarter totaled nearly $6.98 billion. That is up from close to $6.75 billion in the first quarter last year. The union representing air traffic controllers says NAV Canada is mulling over layoffs even if it receives a bailout from Ottawa. Doug Best, who heads up the Canadian Air Traffic Control Association, warns that more job cuts would jeopardize passenger safety and cut critically needed workers. He says more than 100 air traffic controllers are poised to lose their jobs if NAV Canada goes through with permanently closing 7 control towers, leaving pilots to fend for themselves during takeoff and landing. Good news for movie theater goers, at least in the United States. Beginning March 5th, New York City movie theaters can open their doors again in a limited capacity. Officials say theaters can operate, but only at 25% capacity, with no more than 50 people per screening. The announcement comes a year after movie theaters were closed across the state, along with concert venues and nightclubs during the pandemic. The state's governor, Andrew Cuomo, says theaters must require and enforce assigned seating, masks, and physical distancing. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was down 86 points on the day to 18,330. The Dow was up 15 points to 31,537. The S&P 500 was up 4 points to 3881, and the Nasdaq was down 67 points on the day to 13,465. West Texas Intermediate Oil was down 46 cents to $61.24 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 7 cents to $2.88 US. Gold was up 9 cents to $18.05.82 US an ounce. And silver was even on the day at $27.68 US an ounce. Wheat is at $310 per metric ton, barley's at $313, canola's at $7.70, and corn is at $347 per metric ton. Live cattle were down 10 cents to $115.63, feeder cattle were down 75 cents to $138.58, and lean hogs were up $1.30 to $86.43. The Canadian dollar was up slightly over the past 24 hours to $79.45 US. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, it could cost Canadian taxpayers up to $15 billion to fulfill a Canadian Human Rights Tribunal order to compensate First Nations families and children affected by the child welfare system. The new figure from the Parliamentary Budget Office also includes the costs associated with denials or delays of essential services. The updated estimate factors in around 100,000 more First Nations families who are now deemed eligible for compensation. Even though the country of Syria may not have the best record on human rights, it sounds like a government official from that country may be sitting on the UN Human Rights Commission. That has outraged many, including our foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari. That Q&A and her emotions from Ms. Daftari are coming up momentarily. There's a report coming out of Washington that the Joe Biden team allegedly colluded with Iran to foil Donald Trump diplomacy. With more on that is our foreign affairs expert and U.S. political reporter Lisa Daftari joining me once again from Los Angeles. Lisa, the attempt at counter-diplomacy offers a different window into the deep relationships Iran's foreign minister developed with influential U.S. liberals over, the past 10 years?
Absolutely. This is a crazy story. I mean, we knew a lot of this. We knew that John Kerry was using his relationship with the foreign minister of Iran, Javad Zarif. They have a personal relationship with Kerry's daughter having married an Iranian, having John Kerry be at her wedding. Javad Zarif be at the wedding. So there is a relationship there. We knew all that, but we didn't know the extent of which John Kerry was making promises. We didn't know that Robert Malley, the pick for the Iran envoy under the Biden administration, was involved in these talks. So now this report, bombshell report by the Washington Times, puts this in black and white, and it is mind-blowing to read the extent with which these liberals were meeting with officials from Iran on an official capacity, meaning they were making promises. They were guiding them against Donald Trump, not only against Donald Trump, but against the United States. The president who's in office cannot be, manipulated, and they can't work behind his back to make promises that are going to be fulfilled under the Biden administration. And now if you look at where our foreign policy vis-a-vis Iran is headed, it's exactly what they promised. Again, mind-blowing, Logan Act, treason, you can put whatever name you want on it, but it's crazy to read this, that it happened in actuality.
Lisa, the Biden administration says it's ready to begin talks with Iran's regime about signing on once again to the 2015 nuclear agreement. Now, many feel this would be the first step in returning to a diplomatic deal with Tehran, but there are many others who are dead set against this deal. Can you explain why?
Right. So we were involved in the JCPOA, which is better known as the Iran nuclear deal in 2005, which was struck between President Obama and 5 nations and Iran. Which gave the Iranian regime a lot of money, a lot of power, and a lot of time to get on the 1-yard line with regards to their weapons program. It had a sunset clause. It had no mention of human rights abuses. It had no mention of their terror spending in the region. It just gave them a free pass and put on paper nuclear deal so that a lot of people could just sign on to it and say, wow, we curbed the Iranian regime. It's a good thing. We normalized relations with them, and now we have a deal. So obviously a lot of people are against getting back into a 2015 style deal, which gave us nothing. It didn't use any U.S. leverage. It didn't curb the behavior of the Iranian regime, and once again will allow them to go forward with their weapons program. So a lot of people are pushing for a different deal. I had people on my podcast this week talk about the Cyrus Accords. It's a new push that's being presented by two conservative foreign policy experts that say, look, we had the Abraham Accords that brought peace between Israel and its Arab neighbors, which was unthinkable. Why not bring peace between the Iran regime and Israel in the Cyrus Accords? Cyrus, of course, being an ancient ruler of the Persian Empire who was extremely friendly toward Israel and towards, I should say, Israel at the time, the Jewish people at the time. He was a true Zionist, so to speak. So there could be a deal, Hal. It just doesn't have to be a bad one. And that's what a lot of people are saying right now.
You know, what's interesting is that Iran wants the U.S. to come back to the table for the nuclear agreement, yet the regime is allegedly allowing less and less access to inspectors of its nuclear sites.
You know, that just tells you what the leaders in Tehran think about the current administration in the White House. Under the Trump administration, there was a tremendous amount of pressure on the Iranian regime. It was actually called the pressure campaign. It put a lot of sanctions, targeted sanctions on the regime. It didn't allow them to go forward with certain parts of their weapons program, technology, cyber. It made it almost impossible to work financially through the central bank, etc. Now, after the changing of the guard, now you see they're the ones calling the shots. They're the ones that are setting the ultimatums. They're the ones that are setting the conditions to move forward. So it's not a good look for us here in the United States. It's not a good look for the leader of the world to have bullies in Tehran calling the shots and telling us what the terms of the deal should be.
Now, still with Iran, the American government has begun talks to return at least 5 American hostages whom Tehran is holding. Iran is apparently holding dozens of dual nationals, mostly on espionage charges.
Right. These are the bogus charges with which they throw people into prison, and they hold their pawns for days like this so that it could have this appearance that they're doing a trade. Oh, we'll give you these hostages that we're holding for no reason in exchange for X amount of money, X amount of freedom, X amount of, this nuclear deal that, will again give them the economic freedom to go on with their terror spending and their weapons programs and everything else that they've gotten away with. More than anything, what the regime is hoping for is longevity. They want to stay in power. They want the protesters off the streets. They want the pressure off of the economy in the form of sanctions removed so that the Iranian people can live a bit more freely economically, and they will have longevity. They will stay in power, and their reign will not be challenged.
The TV show Saturday Night Live, which often gets very political at times, just asked Alec Baldwin, with his impersonation of Donald Trump over the years. Now, the TV show actually called out New York's governor, a Democrat, and U.S. Senator Ted Cruz, a Republican, in a segment where both politicians were supposed to apologize for their separate scandals. Tell me more about that.
Yes, Saturday Night Live isn't what it used to be. Perhaps it's because of the political climate we're in, or perhaps because sense of humors have changed and the writers aren't doing a good job anymore. Obviously, they brought to light Cuomo's transgressions, Ted Cruz's transgressions, extremely different transgressions, but obviously putting them on the same foot because that's what liberals do and that's what the left-wing media does. They control everything. So they brought in Cuomo probably to make themselves feel better about bringing in Ted Cruz, who traveled to Mexico with his family in the middle of what's going on in Texas, putting that on the same footing as the thousands of people who lost their lives because of the lies that Governor Cuomo made. And look, the Cuomo situation is probably going to go to a federal level in terms of investigation and perhaps litigation and conviction. Don't quote me on that, but that's the gravity of his situation. And to put that on equal footing with someone who probably made a bad call and took his family out of town because things were very bad, it's just not right. But it's not surprising, right, Hal?
Lisa, let's talk about Syria for just a moment, which doesn't exactly have a stellar record when it comes to human rights. Now, they're actually set to have an official from that country, from Syria, posted to a UN human rights forum. What is going on there?
You'd think we're still talking about Saturday Night Live, right? Yeah, this is crazy, but it's not the first time for the UN. We've seen officials from Iran and Saudi Arabia become the head of the women's human rights divisions. We've seen some crazy things, and what do they do day in and day out is call out Israel for its quote unquote transgressions, for their lack of equality when they have more women in universities than men, for their lack of human rights when their gay pride parade has more people attending than or you can ever see that in anywhere else in the Middle East. But that's the reason why Donald Trump withdrew from the UN Human Rights Council, but President Biden got right back in. So you can understand the environment, the political environment of the UN, and allowing Syria to head up one of its human rights divisions. Well, it only speaks to the environment over there and what are they thinking.
Lisa, Turkey's President Erdogan wants to strengthen ties with the United States after its relationship with seriously tested. Now, the American frenemy wants to get a little bit closer.
Yes, so you use my word frenemy. I've always used the word frenemy when I talk to Turkey about Turkey in my segments because that's the perfect way to explain it. Turkey has a lot of similar interests with the United States. We've been on equal, we've been, I should say, face to face in many senses. To try to curb extremists in the region, to try to get on board with, curbing Iran's influence, curbing ISIS influence, etc. Working with the Kurds, which they don't want to do, is where we kind of got into a little pickle with them with regards to Syria. But the issue with Erdogan is that he's always wanted it both ways. He's wanted to work with Iran. He's wanted to also work with Saudi Arabia. He's wanted to work with the United States, but he's also wanted to quash the Kurds, who are our allies. So it's no surprise that he felt a bit of pressure, or a bit of tension with the Trump administration. And now, like all the other rogue characters across the globe, he's come in begging the Biden administration for a reset because of the tumultuous times he had under Donald Trump. And he'll probably get one because everyone's getting one these days.
The Burma protest against the military coup continues, leaving at least 2 people dead and dozens more injured, Lisa. Huge crowds gathered to protest a woman who was killed recently. Tell me more about that.
Yes, this has escalated to a place where now we have casualties. We have the face of the protests. Whenever that happens, I mean, it takes a turn. On the one hand, it really empowers the protesters to say, look, we now have a martyr. We now have an icon, a face to go with the movement. But it also, tells people to take a step back. They don't want to lose their lives. This started out as very peaceful protests and has gone somewhere very different. But there's no end in sight right now. The military has not made any more concessions, has not offered to do anything else to give the people a sense of stability or calm for their future. And in the meantime, there's martial law. People are encouraged to get off the streets, and what will happen, who knows?
Some big news out of Israel, which apparently leads the world when it comes to inoculations per capita. Health officials there say the Pfizer vaccine is preventing about 98.9% of COVID-19 related deaths.
Yes, this is tremendous news for those who have been able to get the Pfizer vaccination, that have been able to get both rounds of the Pfizer vaccination. Israel's goal was to get as many people vaccinated as possible before springtime. So they went, pounding the pavement, trying to get everybody vaccinated, and they've done a tremendous job. It is a very densely populated country, although it is very small, about the size of New Jersey. And they're doing extremely well. They've set their own records with regards to getting more than half of their population already vaccinated. And as you said, the numbers are looking great. We're seeing a very low rate of infection for those who are vaccinated. And again, Israel has made they purchased mostly Pfizer vaccines. So their entire, case study is showing what Pfizer vaccine can do. So it's tremendously helpful for those who are looking at the Pfizer vaccine.
Meanwhile, over in Europe, more specifically the United Kingdom, the government there says all adults will receive their first coronavirus vaccine shots by July 31st.
Yeah, also very ambitious. We'll see how that goes. Look, at least they're setting some sort of deadline. We don't have anything like that here in the United States. Young people are wondering when their turn will be. In the meantime, there's a lot of what we call vaccine shaming, a lot of young people showing up to locations where vaccines are being offered and attempting to get the residuals where they believe that they will be tossed out anyway. So they're not doing anything wrong. But in the meantime, other people are shaming them to allow those vaccines to go to the elderly, the healthcare workers, people who have low immunity, etc. So there's like a culture here. So we're waiting to see when our sort of deadline will be, or if our government will set some sort of goal for themselves. But we've heard nothing yet.
Fresh off of news that the U.S. death toll from COVID-19 is reaching about 500,000, comes word that U.S.'s top doc, Dr. Fauci, says it's possible that Americans may be wearing face masks in 2022.
Yeah, what happened to flattening the curve many, many, many months ago? This is not good news, obviously, and for the people who want to get back to a normal life, it looks like that's not going to be, anytime soon. And what will normal look like anyway? Will people go to sports events? Will they go to musical concerts? Will they be able to attend, a large wedding with 200 people ever again? Dr. Fauci is saying, look, it looks like we will still have to be careful more than a year in. From here on out. It's not good news, but more than anything, people are looking at when will schools open up here in Southern California, for example. Kids are still out of school. It is putting a tremendous toll on parents, on schools, on children themselves. This is extremely damaging. So, the side effects are not just the 500,000 who very, very, very tragically passed from this virus, but there are many, many people who have lost their jobs, lost their businesses, not reopening their businesses, and of course, those children who are stuck at home with the side effects of, the psychological, physical side effects of not being active, not being around other kids, and dealing with this for at least another year.
U.S. political reporter and our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari, thanks again for joining me from Los Angeles.
My pleasure.
With heart disease growing in Canada, there's a real focus on how to care for our cardiovascular health. Stats say heart disease is one of the leading causes of death amongst Canadians. Our guest today is Dr. Clayton Coggino. He's a naturopathic doctor in Lethbridge with Well Vitality Health Clinic. He's also done some training in conventional medicine with a Bachelor of Science in Exercise Science Kinesiology and doing 3 years of research on radiation and cancer at the University of Lethbridge. Dr. Coggino, welcome back to Bridge City News. There's a doctor in the house.
Thank you for having me.
Now, heart disease is a pretty common ailment these days, and a lot of my family members have also been affected by this. But the good news is that to some degree, it's preventable. Can you explain how it's preventable?
A lot of causes of heart disease are preventable. Some are hereditary, of course, but we can do things like eat healthy. Proper diet is very important, and exercise, right? And those things can absolutely prevent heart disease. There's even a few supplements that can help prevent heart disease as well.
Now, when you're talking exercise, maybe a nice walk after dinner, 15, 20 minutes, will that make much of a difference?
It helps, absolutely. Cardiovascular exercise is the majority of the benefit to the heart. So that means getting the heart rate up to approximately 75 to 85% of your maximum heart rate. So you can work with a personal trainer to do that, to do it safely. And that cardiovascular exercise is the exercise that's going to mostly strengthen your heart, lower cholesterol, and prevent the cardiovascular disease. But the walking after dinner is going to also provide you with many benefits too.
Now, there's some people, Dr. Coggino, who are at a higher risk of heart disease. Is it hereditary? Runs in the family?
Yes, it's been proven to be hereditary to a large degree. Certain patients will come in with elevated cholesterol. They may be eating absolutely perfectly. They might be dieting well, exercising, yet still have elevated cholesterol. So same with blood pressure. So there is a component to it. It doesn't mean that you can't lower it, but it's important to get tested and make sure that you're doing sort of everything you can lab testing wise so that it doesn't sneak up on you.
Now, something I've heard as well, doctor, is that a stressful lifestyle, anxiety, depression can also be factors in heart issues. Is that true?
Absolutely. So when you are stressed out, typically a few things happen. The first thing that happens is that your angiotensin goes up. So your blood vessels will actually shrink. They'll get a little smaller. that'll increase your pressure on your blood vessels, and that increases your blood pressure. So that increases your risk of heart disease or heart attack. The other thing is when people are stressed out, they tend to not eat as healthy. So that means usually a higher salt diet, a higher fat diet, eating out more, higher refined carbohydrates and sugars, and those things can lead to increased risks as well.
Now, you mentioned the high blood pressure. It's another culprit that increases heart issues. What kinds of things increase our blood pressure outside of stress?
Yeah, so stress absolutely does. There's a lot of other things that can increase blood pressure. There's more common ones like smoking, for example, stress, lack of exercise, a lot of lifestyle things, even increasing salt in your diet ends up making you drink more water, and it increases your blood volume, which then puts pressure on the blood vessels and increases your blood pressure. Smoking does it as well. A lot of these things are lifestyle changes that you can actually work with, which is great. You just have to look into it a little bit and work on it.
Now, will some alcohol actually lower the blood pressure? I'm thinking specifically of red wine. I have people in my family who love their red wine.
There's certain foods. Alcohol typically isn't the best option when it comes to blood pressure and even cardiovascular disease itself. Alcohol, red wine specifically has resveratrol in it, which is actually a great anti-cancer agent. But yeah, it's probably not the best option, alcohol, when it comes to lowering blood pressure. Chocolate, on the other hand, not milk chocolate, but dark chocolate is, I know, it has to
You're
be
breaking my
dark
heart
chocolate.
here.
Yes, I know. It has to be dark chocolate, but it actually has a lot of cardioprotective effects and a lot of research on it, actually, to back it up.
So outside of exercise and diet, are there other natural ways to potentially lower the high blood pressure?
Yeah, there is. So very common, a lot of people will take magnesium is a very common one. It will vasodilate or open up the arteries. And it works actually really well. We can even give it intravenously in certain more extreme cases. And it's quite fast. Depending on the form, though, you want to take the right form of magnesium to do that. Other things that can lower blood pressure and even just help with cardiovascular stuff is like CoQ10, garlic, serapeptase. There's a lot of things that you can do lifestyle and supplement wise. You can decrease stress by doing yoga and meditation. A lot of these things will activate your parasympathetic nervous system, or the nervous system that calms you down. So with those patients or people with blood pressure that's related to stress, decreasing stress beyond just diet and exercise is a huge factor.
I find with me, as well as meditating on God's word and in prayer, in that regard, brings me a lot of peace to my spirit, my soul, and my body. And sometimes music really helps too. Worship music really helps me in that regard. Now, let's talk about magnesium for just a moment here. What about foods that are high in magnesium that we can eat?
Yeah. So in terms of foods that are going to be elevated in magnesium, they're not going to be strong enough to lower someone's blood pressure. You're going to unfortunately, you're going to have to take something such as like a higher dose of something to lower someone's blood pressure. Blood pressure itself is actually very complex. It's a very complex system, and it's typically actually quite difficult to lower in people. And so prevention is key. So eating a healthful diet high in bioflavonoids, lots of fruits, lots of vegetables, decreased saturated fats. Those are probably the best things to start preventing. Supplementation wise, you can do things beside pharmaceuticals to lower things like cholesterol, which can increase, basically it decreases the circumference of the vein or the artery, which can increase blood pressure. So yeah, there's a lot of things you can do, but once you have an elevation in blood pressure, magnesium itself, it won't be high enough in certain foods. It actually has to be supplemented.
Now, you talked a bit about fats. I'm thinking more specifically animal fats, maybe healthy fats. Many members of my family, they always like to trim the fat off of a steak, off of a pork chop. Are you saying maybe we shouldn't do that?
No, you want to do that.
Oh.
So off of, yes, sorry, I'll clarify.
But that tastes so good. Okay, go ahead.
I know. So saturated fats are the fats that are typically harder at room temperature, such as red meats. So that is what you're talking about. Now, those fats tend to stay around in our bodies, not be utilized quite as much, and they clog our arteries. Those are the ones that are bad. Healthful fats would be omega-3 fatty acids. So those are found in fish, for example, but you can also take supplementation. Now, those will actually lower bad cholesterol. They'll lower the LDL bad cholesterol, and they'll raise the HDL good cholesterol in your body. And there's a lot of foods that have those in there, but the predominant one is going to be sort of following similar to a Mediterranean style diet or even a DASH diet, where you're eating a lot of fruits, a lot of vegetables, and then increasing the healthy fats in your diet, such as fish.
Is there bad fish to eat? Like maybe too much tuna, or like some people like tilapia, as opposed to good fish?
Yes, absolutely. There is not so much for bad fats, so to speak. It's more so because of heavy metals, toxins. So like, for example, tuna is quite elevated in mercury, right? And that's because it's a very large fish. So it bioaccumulates the other fish's mercury. And so it bioaccumulates in its own tissues. So it shouldn't be eaten overly quite a lot. But even elevated global lead level has been shown to increase hypertension or high blood pressure in patients. So the role of toxins in the body is also very important when it comes to blood pressure.
So maybe, I guess, trout and salmon, they're pretty good still, smoked salmon? Traditional favorite in our household.
Yeah. Usually the smaller fish are actually the ones that are going to be healthier for you. So when we're deriving, for example, an omega-3 supplement, typically they're using sardines and anchovies to obtain that omega-3 because you get less bioaccumulation of toxins in the oil. And because fat can store it, you want to make sure that you're eating smaller fish, not bigger fish.
How about shellfish like crab and lobster? Do we still find the omega-3s in those?
Not as much, no. They are high in protein, but they're not high. They're delicious too, but they're
yes, they are.
But they're not high in the omegas like salmon would be.
Okay. How about natural supplements that can really reduce the risk of heart disease, Dr. Cogano?
Okay, so beyond omega-3s, which are probably one of the primary ones, one of my favorite that I like to suggest is actually, it's called Crataegus. It's hawthorn. And hawthorn, it's the leaf and berry that grow on hawthorn trees.
Wow.
And you'd think, well, that's weird, but every single bit of research on hawthorn shows benefit for your cardiovascular system. You can even drink it medicinally as a tea. You don't even have to take it as a supplement. It's safe in pregnancy, is how safe it is. So that's when we know something's extremely safe, is when it's safe in pregnancy. But it vasodilates, so it helps to lower blood pressure. It is a cardiotonic, so it strengthens the blood vessels and strengthens the heart muscle itself. And it can even help to regulate the heartbeat itself if you have an irregular heartbeat.
Let's talk about the body mass index. Sometimes I think that can be really misleading, especially for people who work out and they've got, solid muscle mass. Somebody my height, 6'4", says you should be about 180, 185. I was that in my playing days when I played football in high school. I was a bone rack. You could count every rib on me, right? But now that I'm over 200 pounds, 230 or so, I feel good, I feel strong. But it says, no, you're way over, you're obese. And I'm like, what? Come on. How much stock do you put into that for heart health and BMI?
Yeah, it's important. It absolutely is important, but it isn't the be all end all because there's a lot of people out there nowadays that are working out. And so therefore, they're perhaps not very tall, but they weigh more because muscle weighs more than fat. And so we have to take that into account. So if I see a patient that's lifting weights and is otherwise very healthy, but their BMI is over, then we can correlate that with saying, okay, no, this person actually has a large, what we call fat-free mass, meaning more muscle, more bone density, and their risk is going to be lower. Now, if I see someone that comes in that's sedentary, that doesn't move, that's not exercising, that isn't eating right, and their BMI is elevated, then you know that that's going to correlate very clearly with an increased risk of cardiovascular disease.
Now, we only have about a minute left here, Doctor, but what would you say to somebody who's older, maybe thinking about starting an exercise regimen to get their heart healthy once again, maybe improve their bone density, which is important as you get older? How would you maybe get this person to start working out? What's the first step for that?
Well, I think you want to be safe with it. So I think it's an important thing to start slowly. If that person has never really worked out or exercised before, they could get a personal trainer or come for advice to a professional, to their medical doctor, getting lab testing, making sure that things are good internally, making sure, that they're able to do that exercise. It's important. I think the number one thing, though, is that they find something that's fun for them, because that's really the biggest issue with patients' compliance to exercise, is that they feel like it's an extra job. It's not something that they enjoy doing. So you want to start slow, but you also want to find something that's enjoyable to do.
Yeah, like cross-country skiing in the wintertime, maybe lawn bowling or playing tennis in the summertime or golf. That's good too, right? You get your cardio in, you get some few good swings in.
That's right. It's good to get out. Outside especially is nice right now.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for your expertise today, Dr. Coggino. Clayton Coggino is a naturopathic doctor in Lethbridge with Well Vitality Health Clinic. We appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless, be healthy, and thanks for watching.